The recent invasion of Ukraine is something Europe hasn't experienced for many years. Media outlets are providing first-hand accounts of the fighting to viewers across the world. There is also one word that we just keep hearing:
NATO.
The NATO.
NATO.
So what is NATO? Well, in its basic form, it's a military alliance between countries in Europe and North America. But in today's video, we take a deeper look into NATO's history to better understand its future. NATO's origins can be found following the end of World War II. After the collapse of Nazi Germany and its occupation by Allied forces, tensions grew between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union. The countries which the Soviets had passed through on their way to Germany were effectively under their control. All non-communist political parties were being suppressed in order to keep a tight Soviet hold over them. Germany itself would be divided up into 4 sections, with Berlin, the capital, sharing the same fate. This would essentially usher in the start of the Cold War. The pre-war Soviet borders were already of considerable size, but now with these new countries falling under the same flag, the shift in world superpowers was complete. In 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, was formed. Its initial purpose was to create an alliance between like-minded democratic countries to stop, or at least prevent, further Soviet expansion. It had 12 founding members, across Europe and North America. Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty is at the core of what NATO was founded on. It states that an armed attack against one or more is considered an attack against them all. The hope of this was to prevent either the Soviets or any other aggressors from starting another global war. As the decades rolled on and wars waged across the world, more and more countries began to join NATO. Greece and Turkey were the first to join in 1952, whilst the Korean War was still underway. Since then, many more have joined, with the most recent being North Macedonia in 2020. At present, there are a total of 30 countries within NATO, with its headquarters situated in Brussels, Belgium. But while this was going on, the Soviets didn't just stand still. In 1955, they decided to form their own military alliance, called the Warsaw Pact. This involved a total of 8 countries across Eastern Europe, who, much like those in NATO, agreed to come to the aid of one another. Nuclear weapons have always been a focal point throughout NATO's existence. Britain, France, the Soviet Union and the United States have been the leaders in the armament and testing of nuclear weapons. They have always been used as a deterrent against the opposing aggressors, and this was certainly so during the Cold War. But once the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, Germany was unified in 1990, and the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, many questioned the need for NATO to still exist. At the end of the Cold War, NATO shifted its focus to become a cooperative security. Essentially, they would focus on cooperating with the newly formed Russian Federation and its former allies in the Warsaw Pact. Furthermore, they would manage conflicts throughout Europe, such as those seen throughout the Balkans. In 1995, NATO would see its first use of military force when it entered the war in Bosnia by precision airstrikes against Bosnian Serb positions. A 60,000-strong force was sent in for peacekeeping operations, where peace talks were able to take place. But again in 1999, NATO utilised airstrikes against Serbian targets, who were in conflict with the mostly Albanian population around the province of Kosovo. As the years went on and the calls for NATO to be dissolved grew louder, NATO formed a strategic relationship with Russia. Given the country was no longer considered the main focus of NATO, in 2001 Russia joined NATO in the war against international terrorism and arms control, although since this time the relationship has strained, with differences in opinions. Subsequently, in the same year, Article 5 was invoked for the first time following the attacks in the US on September 11. This rolled into the nearly 20-year war with the Taliban in Afghanistan. Further recent NATO interventions were seen in 2011 inside Libya against the Gaddafi regime. In more recent history, NATO has been called into question for the conflict in Ukraine. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea, a small peninsula in the Black Sea between the Russian and Ukrainian borders. But the events of 2022 have seen an increased pressure in the region. Russian forces have invaded Ukraine and are attempting to seize power. Given Ukraine is not part of NATO, but a former member of the Warsaw Pact, it's in a strange position. There's been calls from various people for NATO forces to not just assist Ukraine as they currently are, by providing weapons, but also to enter the country. At this point in time, NATO is holding firm that they will not intervene unless a member is attacked. The Polish border with Ukraine is likely to become a key area of this conflict. Let's hope that just like World War II beginning with an attack on Poland, the next war isn't started in the same fashion. What are your thoughts on NATO and its formation? Do you think NATO is still needed in this current climate? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below. As always guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to expand your knowledge and join the growing Premier History community.